Welcome everybody to another session of the MAS Beginner Special Interest Group. My name is Suresh Srinivasan. I'm the coordinator of this group. Pretty excited. We have Doug Neverman on today to present a survey of astrophotography. Basically, it's a compilation of various types of imaging that you can do and how to do it, basically. So looking forward to hearing this.
So when I started taking pictures of the sky, I was excited and also a bit clueless, or maybe a lot clueless. And I certainly made a lot of mistakes along the way. And I knew what I wanted to take pictures of at the time because I had looked at pictures and there were galaxies and nebulas and very colorful. And I kind of said, oh, that's kind of cool. I want to try doing that. So I wanted to take pictures of deep space objects. What I didn't realize was that there were all sorts of other categories of astrophotography, and I was only focused on just one. I also came to realize that my entry into the hobby could have been a lot cheaper had I, and I wouldn't have bought the equipment that I did had I looked at other possibilities of astrophotography. And in fact, I don't think I own any of the equipment I originally started with, because as soon as I started doing astrophotography, I figured out its limitations. So what I want to do today is talk about categories of astrophotography and look at some images and talk about the equipment and settings. If you are interested in astrophotography, this presentation will help you focus on a particular category. So we'll be looking at least one image of each of most of the categories. There's some I don't have any pictures for, and the images we will be looking at have all been taken by MAS members. And I was looking through the list, and some of those people are on this video or on this session. So a quick note about the categories. They are somewhat arbitrary and by no means any kind of standard. They are categories I chose for this presentation and based more on the equipment needed rather on the subject matter. So that if you have a particular set of equipment, you can say, well, I kind of want to focus in that area. For each image I have, except for one, I have listed the equipment and the settings used to take the image. Equipment can be very minimal, a camera and a tripod. Some use more expensive equipment. The category you choose will be somewhat determined by your pocketbook. Now, the term somewhat was a specific choice because there is an option for MAS members that requires very little investment, but I'll talk about that later on when we get to that picture. One of the things I will not be doing is delving into details. So if you expected me to talk about calibration frames, back focus, coma, or anything like that, this is not the place where you're going to hear any of that. So with that, let's get started. This is a picture taken by Thor Olsen, and it's star trails. And basically, he set the camera on a tripod, pointed it at the sky, and started snapping pictures. In this category, along with the first couple of categories that we're going to cover, the foreground is just as important as to the picture as the sky. This particular image was taken in Death Valley, and in the foreground is a lone rock with its path as it traveled across the desert. So that is just as important as the stars are. These are usually taken with a DSLR or a mirrorless camera. So if you have a camera and a tripod, this is something that you can try. Now note that the exposures in this is plural. In fact, it's 2,335 plural. So those are a lot of pictures that he took to get this picture. Each exposure being about 8 seconds each. If he had taken the picture, for all of that time, that's about 5 hours of data, then the foreground would be way too bright. So by limiting it to 8 seconds, it keeps the foreground a little bit dimmer. Now that's 2,335 is a lot of finger pressing, but fortunately, technology comes to our rescue. There are pieces of equipment that you can get that will automate this for you. You set it up and you just get it started, and then you can walk away, take a nap, drink a beer, whatever you feel like you're going to do, and then at the end you got these pictures and you take them home, and so once you take them home, you got all of these pictures, and there's a little bit of star trails in each one, and you need to combine them in some way. And he used, in the processing software, you can see he used Photoshop to combine all of those individual images. Most of the pictures in this presentation have been processed through software of some kind. In this case, Photoshop. We were talking about PixInsight earlier. That's another one that you can use. Those both require some more pocketbook money, but in reality, there is some free software out there that you can use. And I know that at least one of our members in MAS uses free software to process his pictures. Here's another landscape astrophotography. We were talking about Mike Shaw earlier. Mike Shaw is a MAS member, and he regularly goes out and gives lectures on night photography. In fact, last August he came out to the MAS Astrophotography workshop, and he has presented at several BSIG events, and he's a good speaker. If you get a chance to hear him, please go and do so. He actually runs some sessions, some free sessions, and he has one coming up this next week about Stellarium, which is a planetarium program. If you're interested, you can find him at MikeShawPhotography.com.
Mike's actually on this call, Doug.
What's that?
Mike is actually on this call, so.
Oh, hi, Mike. So this image, that's the other thing. There are many people that are on there. If you have some comments about this picture, some short comments, you can certainly get online and talk about it. This image is the Milky Way over Split Rock Lighthouse and a rising moon, and this is 3 single shots that he stitched together. And he also managed to, if you look on the left side, to catch some aurora in the picture. Well, these are single shots images, and each image was about 20 seconds long. And when you're taking shots like this, the foreground is just as important as the stars. So there's a lot of planning that Mike can talk about and has talked about in his sessions about how to figure out where to go and take pictures, and he does a good job of talking about that. So if you get a chance to hear him, please go do so. Some of the things that you should be aware of, at least from my point of view, for doing single shot, this is only one picture, this happened to be 3 that he stitched together, is that you need to be kind of aware of. The first is the camera, to me, is very important. I tried doing this with the camera I had, and they turned out awful. I could never get the pictures to look the way I wanted to. There were two difficulties that I really could not overcome. One was the noise in the sensor, the noise that the sensor added to the picture when I was taking it. Because I was taking short images, 15 seconds in my case, the noise that it added was just overwhelmed any of the signal that I had. The other one was the sensor size was it was an APS-C sensor. And so I was kind of limited on the amount of exposure that I could do with that camera. And it was just really too short to capture enough light. I now have a new camera that works much better for taking these. It's a Nikon D750. The other thing you should to note is that to do landscape astrophotography and single shot astrophotography, dark skies are really needed. Any extraneous light is just gonna get into your picture and kind of mess that picture up. I've taken pictures down at Cherry Grove that were single shot, and the light domes from the cities to the south just made a mess of my pictures. The ones that I took up at LLCC turned out much better. This is a picture by Christopher Setness. This is actually two pictures also. It's a composite, which is more and more common if you look at images, excuse me, and wonder how they do so well. Sometimes they're really a composite and not a single shot. This one is two pictures that he took. One is of the stars, and the other one is of the foreground. Now, the image of the stars was taken with a tracking mount rather than a tripod. A tracking mount, when you set it up properly, will track the stars as they move across the sky. Without it, then you would get star trails or oblong stars that are not round. The foreground, however, was not done on the tracking mount. At least it wasn't running at the time, because if it had, that foreground, the trees in the background, would have been blurry. So he took these. What Chris did was then to take a non-tracking image of the foreground, and then the tracking image of the stars as they moved across the sky, and then he combined those into this one picture. Now, the one other thing I want to note is the software that's listed here, Raw Therapy and GIMP, is freeware. These are free software packages that you can download. I'm not sure whether or not they're PC only. Or whether they're available on Apple products.
Hey, Doug, let me just stop you just for 1 second. Everybody who's not on mute, please mute your machine. We're getting some sound feedback from somewhere. Sorry, Doug, go ahead.
All right, you're in charge for once. The comments. Everyone was excited about in 2020 for the Comet Neowise. It's a picture of this, and everybody seemed to be taking pictures of it. This is a picture by Brent Emery, and if you look carefully, you'll see two tails off of the comet. There's this dust tail, and it's actually reflecting sunlight back to the Earth. And the other one is there's a gas trail, and it goes right up there. And he managed to capture both of them. I don't have any of the details about his equipment and settings. I don't know, is Brent on here and can fill us in? No, he's not.
I believe Brent only shoots with a 50mm lens right now. I don't know if he has anything bigger. So it's a Nikon DSLR on a, probably piggybacked on his C8 with a 50mm lens.
Yeah, I asked him for some information. He sent me the picture, let me use it. But he did not send me information about how he took it. So this is a point where, you know, if you get onto the forums or onto Slack, you can post some questions for everybody to look at. The forums are open to everybody. The Slack group is, I believe, open only to MAS members. And there is an astrophotography channel on Slack that you can go into and start asking questions. You probably get more answers than you really want. But
Uh-oh.
who was that? All right.
Can you guys please mute whoever is not muting? Go ahead, Doug.
All right, let's go on. Wide field astrophotography. So the focal length of the lenses that we've used had so far have been pretty short. You know, I think the longest one we had was 24 millimeters long. So it gave a big wide field. And now what I'm going to do is to start stepping towards the longer focal lengths so you can kind of see what those do. So when you go to longer focal lengths, you're going to get a smaller field of view, and the stars are going to move across the screen faster if you're not tracking them somehow. You also notice that the exposures are getting longer, and all of that necessitates using a tracking mount of some kind. And the more focal length you have, the bigger and better mount that you actually need, because when you get to long focal lengths and a small field of view, things will move out of your field of view really fast if you're not tracking and tracking well. If that sounds like it means more money, you would be right. This is a wide field image. It's a sizable piece of the sky. This particular image is a picture of the constellation Cygnus, which lies right in the Milky Way. And there are subtle objects in here, if I can point them out. This star right here is Deneb. And if you look, and this is Satyr. And Albiero is down in here someplace. I don't think it's in this picture, actually. Up here is the North American Nebula. Right here is the Pelican Nebula. This is sometimes known as the Butterfly Nebula. And the one that surprised me that I got is right up in here. That right there is the Veil. And I have a picture where I have zoomed into the Veil. And I believe this is in another constellation, I think, but I think that's an open star cluster. I really haven't identified that one yet. But Cygnus has a lot of stuff inside of it that's fun to take pictures of. This was taken with my Canon 70D, I no longer have it, camera, and it had a nifty 50 millimeter lens. And I placed it on a star tracker, a Star Adventurer, which is a small mount that tracks the stars once you get it lined up properly, set up properly. And that's a process, but if you ever get one, then somebody can help you figure out how to get that set up properly. This one is now a longer focal length. We went from 50 millimeters to 120 millimeters. It was taken with my new camera, my Nikon D750. And 120 millimeters, 35 300-second pictures. So that's just short of 3 hours of pictures. When you do astrophotography, the more total time that you can get for an exposure, the better. The reason for this is not because the objects are faint. It is because there is a variation in the light that reaches the camera. If you look at a specific point in the sky and measure the number of photons you get, you will find it varies from image to image. Measurements could go, 25,000, 24,000 on the next one, and the next one is 25,433, and so on. And that's because there is noise in that signal, noise coming from our own atmosphere, from the stars itself, and that's bad for us in that we never get the actual true value. We might get it, but it would just be, excuse me,
I think we have a cat delay. So while Doug, let me just add a couple of comments that are on the chat while you're away. Mark had mentioned that there's a website. There's also a Facebook page called Masters of PixInsight, which is a good group for learning how to use PixInsight, the imaging software, the processing software. So check out Masters of PixInsight. And Chris mentions that if you're interested in joining Slack, send an email to slack@mnastro.org, and they will get you set up. Does anybody have any questions up to now or any comments? Back to you, Doug.
Okay, thank you. So we have this variation called noise that we call noise, and that's bad. We can never get the actual true value. The good news is that the noise is statistical in nature, and that if you get enough measurements and average them together, you will get a better estimate of the actual signal. You will probably won't never get the true value. Well, you will if you take infinite number of samples, then you'll probably find the actual value. So this is why we take hours of data. This is why I took 3 hours, nearly 3 hours of data to get this image, was to reduce the amount of noise and to make my pictures better. So again, there's Deneb. Whoops, I gotta go over here. There's Deneb right there, Satyr right there, North American Nebula, and the Pelican Nebula. Let's go on. How come I'm not going on? There we go. So again, we're going to increase the focal length. That was 120 millimeters. Now we're at 650 millimeters. It's a smaller piece of the sky. The two objects that you see are Bode's Galaxy and the Cigar Galaxy. I'll let you figure out which one is which. If you've been looking at the cameras on these slides and looking at the manufacturer names, they've been familiar names like Canon, Fuji, Nikon. Sony cameras are also used. So these are DSLRs or mirrorless cameras that are very common. Listed here is a ZWO camera. This camera and many like it are meant to be used for astrophotography. Cameras like Nikon and Canon and the others actually have an infrared filter sitting on the sensor. This filter prevents infrared signals from coming in and basically making your pictures not look very good. And because it rolls off the red, even some of the red light in the visible spectrum, it keeps them from reaching the sensor. The problem for imaging with this regard is that the night sky is the most abundant material in the universe, and when it gets hot, it glows red. Sulfur, another abundant element, also glows. It glows even a little bit redder. So, given that most of the stuff you're going to see is hydrogen and is glowing red, you take it with a DSLR or mirrorless camera right off the shelf, then you're going to lose some of that red. This kind of camera, like this ZWO 2600, does not have that filter on, so it actually does a better job in capturing the light that's coming from space. You can get DSLRs modified to take that infrared filter off, but to my mind, and this is an opinion at this point, I think it's well, number one, I'm not sure I want to send my camera out to have it modified. That seems dangerous to me, but people have done it. But the other thing is that the cost to modify it compared to the cost of buying a camera that is already set up to take color photos without that infrared. That seems like a better choice to me, but again, I'll say that that's an opinion. There's another story here that I want to talk about with Brian. Mark and I worked with Brian about a year ago. He said he wanted to get into imaging, and so we connected up with him and talked with him online for a couple times. And so Brian took this image in the summer of 2021, so about 3 or 4 months or 4 or 5 months after we contacted him. And at the time, he didn't own a telescope and had never taken a picture of the night sky. What he did have was access to an imaging rig that MAS housed down at the Cherry Grove Observatory. He drove down, took the images, and took them home and processed them with this result. And I'm going to show you my first picture that I ever took. I wish it was this good. There is this option. When I said somewhat more expensive before, this was to my point, is that MAS does have some imaging facilities, not in Cherry Groves, but also down in Eagle Lake Observatory, where you could get on and take some pictures. This one was also done on the imaging rig that down in Cherry Grove, and I took this actually at the beginning of this month on February 5th. It was clear enough and warm enough, one of the probably few days in this winter where it's clear and warm, that you could actually take some pictures. Now, there's a big difference here between this picture and the previous one, and it's not the object necessarily, but if you look in Brian's picture, his processing software he used to get this was PixInsight. On mine, I didn't use any software. So basically what I did was I went down to CGO and took 60-second pictures using this particular software. And I used an option in the program called live stacking. And there are several programs that do live stacking. The SkyX TSX is one of them. And when I was done with my 60-second pictures after that hour, I was able to, I adjusted the colors a little bit to make it look better. And then I saved it as a JPEG and then drove home with a JPEG. So I didn't have to do any other process. So that's a nice feature of that software, including the one down at CGO. The CGO, the imaging system at CGO is available for use. You must be a MAS member in good standing, be at least 18 years of age, and complete training. And when the weather finally warms up, we'll have some more training sessions. I hope it warms up anyway. And we'll have some more training sessions. They'll be advertised on the forums at least. That's where I've advertised them in the past. We'll probably expand that advertising to Slack, and if we don't get a lot of people jumping on board, we'll probably send out an email and see what kind of response we can get. But it's a really good system. It's the procedures. We have procedures written up for you, and there's videos on how to use it that you can watch before you go down. And the software that we're using, in this case LTI version of TSX, makes it very easy to go down and take some pictures and come back with something.
Hey, Doug, there's a couple of comments out there.
Sure.
Mark Peterson mentions that Canon had sold several models of DSLRs tailored for astrophotography.
Yes.
IR filter not installed. I know that I have a Nikon D810A, which is also tailored for astrophotography. You might want to discuss briefly just what that means to have the IR filter with DSLRs. And Conrad mentions that SharpCap Pro does live stacking.
Yes.
And I can also mention that the ASI Air does live stacking now. And then Mike Glazer requests that you please post your training sessions on Slack when they are scheduled.
What was the last?
Please post your training sessions on Slack when you have them scheduled.
Oh, yes.
I think he means for CGO, I believe.
For the
Imaging rig.
for the imaging rig down at CGO. Yeah, I talked about the removing the infrared sister, and there are some Nikon and Canon cameras where they did not put the infrared filter on those sensors, so they're already removed. The problem is when you buy that camera and then you try to use it for normal everyday pictures, they're going to look a little bit funny because that IR filter is not there. So you may need to process them a little bit. I haven't really looked at those. That's what I have heard. Just be aware of that. You're going to spend money on that, and it will be only for probably for night viewing or night imaging. All right, let's go on. Now we're deeper space. We were at what were we at before? We were at 650 millimeters for this telescope. For this telescope, we're just about 2,000 millimeters. That's 2 meters, if you think about it. This is the Hamburger Galaxy. It was taken by Mark Jobe. And Mark has, he didn't take it with this one, but Mark has an interesting setup that he has. His primary imaging rig that he has is in Texas, and he runs it remotely from anywhere he has an internet connection. He logs on, he can roll the roof back and forth and go to his target, and he starts taking pictures. And those pictures are uploaded to the cloud someplace, and he downloads them to his home computer, and he processes them there. It's a pretty sweet setup. I've actually gone down with Mark to see his rig down there. There is a downside, however, with having a remote facility, especially when it's 2 traveling days away. If something breaks, the rig is likely out of commission until he can get down there to fix it. And that happened to him, I think, a year or so ago, and he had to go down. I think he actually got down a year ago and got it fixed. But until then, there was nobody down there that he could call to have it fixed. So, you know, it's pretty sweet, in fact, that he can do this from the comfort of his home where it's nice and warm and in the winter, and get pictures to process. This is a good time to also bring up another option for getting images without buying equipment. You can rent time on imaging rigs that are available on the internet. You specify an object, and you buy time. You specify an object for the images. The images are taken and then they're delivered to you. You don't get to run the telescope or even watch it work. You just say, I want these pictures, and it does it for you. You just get the data. I know that Conrad Sanders, who is on this call, he's done this in the past couple months because, well, it's cold outside, people. And the telescopes that he uses, I think, Conrad, you can jump on here if you want. I think the ones you've used are in. Did you use one in Chile?
I did. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I use a service called Telescope Live. And the last one I just did was the, I can't believe I forgot the name.
No, that's okay.
It's in the Southern Hemisphere. It's the Southern Hemisphere. Of course, you'd never be able to get it here, but.
Yeah, that's okay. We don't need the name. But, you know, the scopes are in various places around the world. So yeah, if you wanted to do some southern hemisphere imaging, you can buy time on that and on those systems. And they have a variety of focal lengths. So if you're going to choose an object, make sure you choose the right focal
I
length.
just remembered the name, Doug. It's Edda Carina.
Okay.
That was
One that we're
amazing.
not familiar with here up in the northern latitudes. All right, let's go on. I noticed that Volz is on the call also. This is the Rosette Nebula, and you'll notice that the camera was a QHY 22 mono camera. You'll also know that notice that it's been cooled to minus 30 degrees. This is also an advantage to not all, but most of the cameras that you buy for astronomy work. You can cool them down. And the reason we do that is that the sensors, as they heat up, and there's electronics, is basically an integrated circuit. And as you use them, they heat up, and that heat makes electrons fall into the wells. I'm getting too deep in the subject matter, but it makes the heat will make the sensors noisier. This was probably one of the problems I had with my original camera, and why it didn't excuse me, why they didn't look so good. But we cool the cameras down, and by cooling them, they have less noise. You'll also notice that there's another category here called filters. HA, S2, and O3 are the ones that I want to focus on here. In a regular camera, a Canon camera or other broadband cameras, we take pictures of the whole spectrum, all of the light from the visible spectrum of all the light that we as humans can see. And excuse me, I need a drink of water. But the fact of the matter is that the light that's coming from the sky is really not covers it. Looks like it covers the whole visual, but most of it is actually in fairly narrow bands of light. We talked about hydrogen earlier, and it glows red. Oxygen glows at a bluish color, a little bit on the green side. Sulfur glows at a reddish color. So when we take narrowband images, we put filters that only let the hydrogen light come through, or only the oxygen and only the sulfur. So he took pictures of those individual filters, and then he combined them together. So that's why it's a monochrome camera. Doing filters on a color camera, while it would work, does not work real well. So there's a couple advantages to doing this. Number one, you can kind of move the colors around, so you don't have to make the hydrogen red. You can make it green, and the sulfur you can make red. And in fact, if you look at pictures from the Hubble Space Telescope, where they have all of these nice golden colors, those are actually it's called the Hubble palette, and they move they map the filters, the images from each of the filters to the red, the green, and the blue in a specific order. Another advantage to taking narrowband pictures is that you can take them from a light polluted area, and it throws out kind of all of the light pollution. So it's less susceptible to light pollution. And what else was I going to say about it? I can't remember. All right, let's go on.
Hey, Doug, can I cut in for a second?
Sure.
We've got a couple of comments and a couple of questions. Mark Peterson and I wanted to just point out that the Canon RA and the Nikon D810A both also work in the daytime. These are astrophotography cameras, DSLRs,
Okay.
that do also work in the daytime. Neil, if you don't mind, I'm going to save your question till the Q&A at the end, because I think it's going to take a few minutes to answer your question. And Linda, yours too, because I'm thinking maybe we get a few other people involved in your question. That's it. Back to you, Mark.
Or Doug, one of us.
Sorry, Doug. Well, you spelled your own name wrong on a previous slide, so.
Oh, did I?
Yes.
Wow. All right, so here is another narrowband picture that I took. This is of the veil. I mentioned to it earlier. It's in the constellation Cygnus, and it's difficult to see with visually. It's not very bright, and you kind of need an O3 filter to be able to see much of it. So this is an advantage. You can see objects that are difficult to see visually. Now, the veil is actually a very large object. It's about 3 degrees across as we view it from here on Earth. If you hold out your hand out in front of you and you stick up your pinky finger, everybody's doing that right now. That width of your pinky finger is about 1 degree. So it would take 3 pinkies to cover the veil. As a comparison, our moon has an apparent dimension from our point of view of about a half a degree. So you could cover 2 moons with your finger up in the air like that. So it would take 6 moons side by side to cover the veil. This is again from our perspective. The actual size of the veil is very, very large in comparison. So the object, the point of all of that is that this object is really, really big. In fact, it's so big that I cannot get it all into one image. And so I had to take multiple images of different panels side by side and then stitch them together to make this particular image. Now, I had a question when I did this presentation. So why not just use a shorter telescope and with a wider field of view? And the answer comes about as well. I don't necessarily have all of a telescope in that size. I could use I can now use one of my. I can attach my astronomy camera now to my Nikon lenses, so I could take it that way. But the real reason I did it was that I can print this on a bigger piece of paper, and the details that I have in this picture would look very nice. If I took it with a shorter focal length, then I'm going to lose details in the veil in the picture itself. Just to give you an idea, most pictures come out of cameras and they get measured in their raw form. They get measured in megapixels. This picture, I forget what size it is, but it's more like a gigapixel image. So 100 to 1,000 times more pixels than you would see normally. I haven't printed this yet. I actually tried to get it printed, but the file is so big that their site would not take this picture. So I'm searching for another site to actually download it. I think I was limited to 500 megapixels, and this thing was or 500 megabytes, and this is at least twice that. All right, you heard from Conrad earlier. We're going to look at some of his planet images. There's an interesting work here. I guess I only got this one. I thought I had another one. there's a couple things that you need to know about taking pictures of planets. Number one, they're very small in size. So you need a long focal length to be able to take these pictures. Note that this is over 2,000 millimeters, 2 meters of focal length to get this picture. They're actually very, very small. I tried taking pictures with my 80 millimeter, 480 millimeter focal length, and all I get is little dots in the center. Then the other thing is that since you got this long focal length, planets move through the field of view very fast if you're not tracking. So you need to be tracking. With the addition of a telescope on the heavier side, you'll need a strong mount to be able to track those properly. The other interesting problem with taking pictures of planets is the Earth's atmosphere. Stars are points of light that twinkle. And they twinkle not because they're twinkling themselves, but because of refraction through the atmosphere. And that's why you see stars taking a fairly good size on a picture. It's because we're twinkling and it's moving the light from pixel to pixel. Planets, on the other hand, are not points of light. They are disks of light, little circles of light. And each point in that disk is being refracted in some form as it goes through the atmosphere. The result is that if you take a single image and look at it, a single frame, and look at it, it will probably not be a disk. It'll be kind of warped with strange circles and dents in it, and it just won't look much like a planet and won't look very pleasing, although it might be interesting. So how do they handle that? To the rescue is the movie. It helps that planets are very bright, and short exposures in movies are for any one frame in a movie is good enough to get a good image. The process then is you take a movie for a certain amount of time of the planet, and then you search through the thousands of frames that you have in that movie to find the best ones where the planets are actual circles. And then you take those and put them together and make the picture. Now that sounds tedious, but there is software, there is help in the form of software. Registax, the programs that he has listed here, I think it's AutoStagger 3 is the program that actually searches through the movie to get those files. So that's how that's done. If the moon is a very common object to photograph. It's big and it's bright. You can see here that the image was taken with a 390 millimeter telescope. And the exposures are also fast. I don't have that information, Conrad, but you don't have to take a very long picture, and you're gonna get a picture of it. The challenge can sometimes be that, the moon is also a very popular object in landscape astrophotography, and the challenge can be to know where to locate yourself and what time to get the moon in just the right position in relationship to the landscape so that you can take the picture that you want. There are tools to help you figure that out. And I'm going to go back and reference to Mike Shaw. He does a great job of teaching people how to do that with an app on your phone, on your tablet. So another plug for Mike Shaw. Here is another picture of the moon. Actually, I want to go to this one. Here's another picture of the moon. Either that or it was a messed up attempt to take a picture of the sun. Now, eclipses are I've never tried doing eclipse pictures. I'm not sure I'm really interested in doing it because back in what was it 2019 when when we had the eclipse coming through
2017.
17, sorry. Thank you, Suresh. I watched Suresh and others plan and prepare, and they went out and practice for doing an eclipse, because if you don't do it right the first time, you don't get a second time unless you want to travel to someplace else or wait until the next one. So the difficulty about and why you want to really plan out and practice is the fact that you want to be obviously pointing at the sun or the moon before you start taking pictures. Now, pointing your sensor at the sun is bad for the sensor. Well, it won't be a sensor after a while. It'll just be a piece of silicon that doesn't do much, because the sun is so bright that it'll burn the electronics out. It just heats it up too much. So you put in a solar filter on the front of your telescope and get yourself all lined up. Now, at the proper time, you take the filter off to take the pictures. And there's a specific time when you can do that. And then, more important, you got to put it back on as it goes away. And there is software that you can get down for your phone, I believe, that will say, okay, it's time to take your filter off and put your filter back on. It sounds very stressful to me, and so the problem is that if you don't get it right, then you have to wait for the next one. To that regard, the next one coming through the U.S. is actually in 2 years, 2024, April of 2024. I think it's April 8th.
Yep.
And it'll be a total eclipse that runs through the U.S. And it starts down in Mexico, but it goes through Texas and then up and exits the U.S. Up around Maine. My daughter lives in Indiana, and I'm going down in April to go visit her, and we're going to go watch. They'll be in the path of totality, and because I've never seen one, they say it's really interesting. It's really fun. If you are interested in this kind of work, then you should probably and you haven't done any astrophotography or any photography like this, then you should probably start to get ready now. I would defer to Suresh and others who do this a lot, and connect up with them, and start to put together equipment you need and all the planning you need. And I think, Suresh, you're headed down to Texas to take pictures down there.
That's my plan. I don't trust the Midwest in April.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely start planning now. I usually start planning a couple of years in advance. Doug, one quick comment from Mark Connolly. If you can go back one slide. One more.
One more. Okay.
This is probably, well, one more, sorry. Mark mentions that the rotation of the planet needs to be taken into account also. There you go. So just want to make sure, you might want to speak for a second on the rotation, taking that into account.
If Mark wants to come on and add a little bit of information, that would be appreciated.
I don't know if he's on, but I'm not sure if he's able to connect. Basically, I think what he means is for Jupiter, you can only take it, I think it's 60 seconds. If you take video of longer than 60 seconds, you start to get some rotation because the planet rotates so quickly that you have to compensate for it. I think Saturn is like it's like 2 or 3 minutes, and Mars is like 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah, that's correct, Suresh. Jupiter spins very fast. That's exactly right. 60 seconds max. Then you can also get this program called WinJupos. I haven't done that yet. With the rotation, you can actually make like a video of the planet. You know, I haven't done that, but
Yeah, it's actually amazing to see what that software does. It derotates the images so that you get one still frame like this.
right.
Any other comments so far for the planet imaging or eclipse imaging portion? Anybody have any questions, comments? All right, back to you, Doug.
Yeah, I have all of these categories, but I have not done everything, all of these categories. I've done a few of them, but planet imaging is not one that I have tried.
It's
I hate to say the
severely,
word yet, but
it's severely painful here in the Midwest because of our air.
yeah,
And in the most recent years, the planets have been low in the sky as well, which has
Yeah.
also caused problems.
yeah.
One other thing too is I don't know if you're gonna talk about solar imaging, but I started doing solar imaging and that's a lot of fun. I mean, for one thing, it's not freezing out. And you can have a lot of fun with solar imaging too.
Yeah.
I have a solar scope now that I bought from London. It's really fun.
Yeah, solar is great to do. It is. The
Yeah.
processing is not quite as difficult as planet image processing, but it also has its challenges.
Mhm.
All right, let's go on. So let's talk about cell phone imaging. So this is an image taken with a cell phone by Chris. Now, before you get too excited about the possibilities of your phone and sitting in your pocket, I want to tell you that what he did to take this picture was attach his cell phone to a telescope and then snap pictures through the eyepiece. So here's an example of the telescope and then just a little platform that the phone sits on, and then you can take pictures through that. I don't know a lot about cell phone astrophotography. I do hope to give it a try this coming summer. I do have the equipment for it now. To this, maybe the surprise of some of the people that don't know me, I do have a visual scope.
What?
So I'm going to give it a try this summer. I think there's a couple of problems that I need to address. First is the control of the camera settings. You know, when you got a photo, an application that'll run your picture or take pictures for you, but it makes a lot of assumptions and adjustments for you. So it'll set the ISO, it'll set the exposure, and do a lot of work for you, and they'll work in daytime and even in low light. But to say astrophotography images are low light is probably an understatement. Excuse me. I think that, and then the other problem that I need to address is the fact that when you touch that phone, as soon as you touch it, the telescope is going to shake if you touch it very hard. So you got to be very, very gentle in touching it. I've actually seen a video where somebody was taking pictures with a cell phone, and his cell phone would respond to voice commands. So you had it all set up, and then he said, "Smile," and it would take a picture. So find a camera app where you can control the camera's ISO and exposure and use voice commands. Get one of these little platforms that you can use to adjust, and it clamps to the eyepiece actually, and then you can move the phone to get it on top of the eyepiece.
Doug, just a quick comment on this.
Yeah.
For people that are interested, Will Van Cleve is probably our club expert at using the cell phone to shoot through a telescope. He's actually taken deep sky pictures, including the Orion Nebula and clusters, with his iPhone. This type of imaging is called digiscoping, and it's really popular with kids, as you can imagine, taking their cell phone and putting it up with the camera. So if any parents are out there, they're interested in getting something like this for their kids, you could Google digiscope, digiscope, and these products will come up as a way to attach your camera to your telescope.
Here's another cell phone picture that Trina took a picture of. It's through her telescope. Now, she didn't have an attachment. I believe she just kind of tried to maneuver the cell phone to just the right place and then snapped a picture. I actually have tried that on a telescope and trying to get the phone in just the right place. I found it difficult and very frustrating. And to Suresh's point, here is a deep sky object that Chris took of the Swan Nebula that he took through his telescope. I'm not sure which eyepiece he used. He sent me both, and so it's one of those two. 30-second exposure is probably Lost Mandy G11 mount, so he was tracking. But again, I would be concerned about, pressing the button. I would want to have voice command to be able to, so that the camera doesn't shake while you're taking a picture, or the telescope doesn't shake. Here's another one by Chris also, of the Dumbbell Nebula. So I'm done with the pictures. I don't have particularly any pictures for these categories. Aurora is very, very common. If you're interested in doing those are, again, just a camera and a tripod. They occasionally reach as far south as Minnesota, and they are also somewhat unpredictable. I remember being at one place up north, and we were set up to take pictures through our telescopes, and all of a sudden some kind of party or something descended upon us, and there were 30 people there. And said, well, what's that all about? And he says, oh, there might be northern lights tonight, aurora tonight. There are apps that will report measures and give you prediction as to whether or not there'll be an aurora out there. But yeah, you go out there and you when you get when the measures are favorable, people will quickly pack up and head out from the city lights and wait, hoping that they'll appear. I actually saw some. I just happened to be out taking pictures one night and took some pictures of them. It didn't turn out very well, but it was my first time. And it was before I was introduced to Mike Shaw. Mike Shaw talks about that kind of stuff.
Hey, Doug, just real quick on Aurora. A good website to monitor for Aurora activity is spaceweather.com. And a good app for alerts on Aurora is Aurora Pro. That's a good app for alerts on when they're coming, when they're visible.
Conrad mentioned solar imaging a couple minutes back. The sun in the sky is about the same size as the moon, which is why we have eclipses rather than transits. And so the focal length would work well for both. If you decide to do solar imaging, make sure you're very careful to protect your camera with a solar filter. If you don't have the solar filter and get it exposed, it's no longer a camera. It's just a piece of it's just dead weight at that point. I pressed the wrong button. There we go. Spectroscopy looks at stars in a particular way. This is something I want to try. Basically, you put a piece of hardware called a grate that you insert into your optical path, and it acts like a prism and spreads the light from the star into a rainbow. There's then software that you can use to show the profile of how much of each color are you getting. And from that, you can determine the star's type and temperature, identify the composition of a star or nebula from its emission and absorption lines. You can detect cosmological redshift of a distant quasar. This is right from their website of the people that I'm thinking of buying the grate from, and measure blue shift of supernova's expanding shell. I know that Suresh has a grate, and has
Yeah.
used it.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
thinking
called
about the
RSpec.
software for it yet.
Yeah, it's RSpec, but RSpec spectroscopy is the name of that company.
And then the last one that I don't have pictures for would be, there are some members that are doing scientific work with their telescopes as amateurs. And basically what he does is he gathers information on asteroids and then he shares it with the scientific community, and the scientific community uses that information. That's Russ, if you ever get to meet him, you can talk about that. He actually did a presentation at a MAS meeting a couple months ago. That was very interesting. All right, so
Doug,
yes.
there's a couple, I'm a little bit behind on some of the comments on here. Let me
Oh, sure.
catch up real quick. If you go back, I think to the moon pic, Conrad says that he uses a program called Nightcap on his iPhone to take images of the moon. And then Fazia, I hope I'm saying that right, Fazia asked, can you show the last pic again? I'm not sure which one and what the question is. Fazia, can you chime in real quick and say which picture you were talking about?
Oh, was the picture right before the last slide? So it was like a blue light.
I think it was the dumbbell. Yeah, probably that one. Is that the one?
Yes, that's it. Just
Did you
want to
have
get a close up.
Oh, sure. And then Mary Lynn and Wally commented that if you have an Apple Watch, you can trigger the shutter on your iPhone using your Apple Watch.
Ah, cool. I got Android.
Yeah, I have Android too. All yours, Doug.
All right, thanks. All right, so if you want to get started in astrophotography, first of all, be careful of the advice you get online, especially someone who says, well, you have to buy this. You have to buy this. That's not necessarily the case. There are many paths to getting what you want. Hopefully this presentation will give you maybe an idea that says, oh, I want to try this or I want to try that in terms of in this category or that category. Join MAS, watch the MAS forums. The Slack group is also active. There's an astrophotography channel in the Slack group. So join that and ask questions. Just because everybody seems to be using terms that you don't understand, that's no reason not to ask a question. You'll get probably plenty of answers from people who want to answer your questions. Also on the forums, we usually have ISPs, impromptu star parties will get listed. This is especially true over the last couple of years as we've been tracking people getting together because of COVID. So get on there and see who's going out. And if you see a bunch of people going out to Eagle Lake Observatory or down to Cherry Grove, go down there and ask questions. They'll be a little bit distracted sometimes as they're trying to get their equipment set up. But I'm sure that most of them will be happy to answer questions for you. I recommend finding a mentor, or even making sure you're talking to people, because we've made plenty of mistakes. I've made plenty of mistakes in trying to get my imaging up and skills up and going, and I continue to make mistakes. And I got procedures that I follow to make sure I don't make too many mistakes. And the other thing then is, don't start by going out and buying equipment unless you don't have any. Start with the equipment you have or is available for use. And this is where the imaging rig down at CGO or going out and buying time on different telescopes. And do that. Even some of us will be are willing to share data actually, and you could process those if you wanted to try just the processing and see what that was like. So, well, rather than going to questions, we'll go to questions later. But I said I was going to share some of my journey here. So here is M31. This is the very first image that I took and I processed through freeware. Actually, it was through GIMP. Actually, Deep Sky Stacker and GIMP. And this is what I came up with, and I was pretty proud of it when I got it. And then I started doing other stuff, and I said, "Oh, that's not as good. Let me see if I can do that better." So I took this same data and I reprocessed it, and in now a product called PixInsight. And so this was my first image, but reprocessed. That's the nice thing about taking lots of images. I got lots of images now I could go back and reprocess and try to make better. So as I said, back in the beginning, I have a different set of equipment now and better skills. So after 6 years, this is that same object, M31, and I took it this past fall. Some of it I took up when I was up at Long Lake Conservancy Center for NNSF, Northern Nights Starfest, that the club has, or the society has, in towards the end of August. And at least I'm making improvements. We'll see what comes after that. But even after 3 years, I had taken this image. This is the Wizard Nebula. He's lying on his back right now, but you can kind of see his pointed hat over on the left. Pointed out. There's his hat. There's his mouth and nose, and there's his eye. And he's got a couple arms that are reaching out. This is the star forming region. But even after 3 years, now, having said that, I'll tell you that I took this image through the imaging rig down at CGO. So, get started and get advice and work on making things better. So I don't know if there are any more questions.
Yeah, there are 3 questions that I held up from earlier in the presentation just because I thought they would be lengthy questions. Let's open this up also, Doug, to others to chime in on, because I think there's other people that can input on these.
Yes,
Neil,
I freely admit that I don't know everything.
Neil Worthingham asks, what's the cost to buy time of remote telescopes? Maybe Conrad
Can
or
you give
Todd
us
Farnham.
an idea?
Yeah, I can. The Telescope Live, I think they have a basic, or no, they have the bronze plan. I think that's $9.95 a month, and you get 5 observations. And then I'm on the silver, and the silver is $20 a month. And based on the plans, they'll give you so many images. Now, what's nice about Telescope Live is I do both. They already have canned images that you could just download and play with PixInsight, so you don't have to even rent any time. If you just want to get familiar with how to use PixInsight or Star Tools or whatever, you can download the data, and the data it's nice. It's all calibrated already. You don't have to worry about darks and flats. And then they have that option where you actually rent time. And I've done that, like the Carina Nebula. I scheduled a certain time, and I'm not watching it, but the next day I come back and that's called an advanced imaging session. And I don't think you get that with the bronze. I think the bronze, you only can download stuff that people have already done. So just go out to Telescope Live and check out the plans. They've got telescopes in Spain, and they've got telescopes in Chile, and the Eta Carina I did in Australia. So they've got one scope there. But for me, in the wintertime, this has been an awful winter, we all know. And I've used it more than any of this winter because this has been a lousy winter here. So.
Hey, Conrad, in talking with other people like Todd Farnham, for example, he does what you do with a different organization. It seems like a lot of the pricing on these packages is how much time you'll have to get to request your own images that they shoot versus like a group decides on the images and then they take them. Is that kind of
Right.
your experience?
Right. Yep. Telescope. I don't know what service. Doesn't Todd use like Deep Sky West or something like that?
Yeah, it's in New Mexico and Chile.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a little more specialized. Telescope Live is more canned. I mean, you actually you're scheduling time on the telescope. But if you don't want to do that and you just want to just download images that they shoot for you to practice your imaging skills, like with PixInsight, then you can download those. Like I said, I do both. I like the fact that I can schedule my own time, pick my own filters, pick my exposure time. And based on that, it can get expensive. I mean, I think I spent $80 on my Edda Carina, but I've got like months of credits. They give you 20 credits every month and you can build those up. So, I'm paying $20 a month, but they even have a gold, which is like $50 a month. Well, I'm not going to do that, but I'd rather do my own equipment, to be honest with you. But when you get desperate in the wintertime in Minnesota, it's good to practice with it.
Yeah,
So one of the things that Conrad said was download it for PixInsight. PixInsight is a software processing tool. It's not the only one out there. A lot of us use PixInsight. Chris uses GIMP and raw therapy. So it's not only just PixInsight. There are other packages, including Photoshop, if you wanted to go that route.
let me also mention this too. Probably the most popular, the largest of these remote sites, probably Slooh, SLOOH. So slooh.com if you guys are interested. But the thing about these is a lot of people that get into imaging will ultimately spend a lot of money, sometimes thousands of dollars on their equipment. And when Conrad says it's $20 a month, it actually brings it into scope that it's really not all that much money. If you're really interested in getting this kind of data and learn how to process, it's kind of a nice, easy way, kind of like our rig at CGO, where you don't have to spend a whole lot of money to get data that you can learn how to process with. Anybody else want to chime in on that question on remote scopes? Okay. Linda Battle asked, what's the benefit of PixInsight over Photoshop, for example? Who wants to answer that one?
Look, that's a religious war.
Where's Rodrigo?
I kind of addressed that with her, Suresh, Doug.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, kind of offline. She contacted me in the background. So, my idea about that is if you're familiar and fluent in Photoshop, then I think you can do everything in Photoshop that we can do at PixInsight. PixInsight mostly is, it's completely a deep sky imaging processing piece of software. Photoshop, Photoshop, you can do it all. I mean, you can go, daylight, portrait, blah, 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 but you can also do deep sky stuff. I've seen it. I actually pointed her to the masters of PixInsight because they actually have a track that Warren Keller set up years and years ago because he started out his original company, IP for AP, they processed, or he had tutorials for using Photoshop to process deep sky images. And that's how he really got started until he got into PixInsight. So it is possible, and I know that it works well. So, and I know if you are careful and, you can find some YouTube stuff out there too, but, I like Doug will caution you to say, be careful. But, to say, Doug is right. There's people that are very religious about it. It's got to be Photoshop or it's got to be PixInsight. I really disagree. I used to be that way. I've kind of come around and kind of changed because, if I say use the tool that you're comfortable with. Sure, there is a learning curve. It originally starting in Photoshop, that there is a learning curve to learn Photoshop, and I think there'll be a learning curve using Photoshop to process deep sky images. I know it's possible. I mean, you're still going to need some software to do some of the stacking and things like that, the registration and things like that. So I know you're going to need some other pieces. You aren't going to be able to, I mean, you could do it in Photoshop. I just can't imagine how painful that would be to do the stacking in Photoshop. I know it's possible.
Well, let me add to that, because I've worked with Rodrigo on Photoshop, is that there are a lot of tools out there for Photoshop that make it a lot easier. But like Mark said, PixInsight is primarily an astronomy processing tool. Photoshop is very versatile, right? And it can do more. The other thing I want to add is, while both these are technical, I find PixInsight to be more technical. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but the one thing I should say for people that are just starting out, I believe a PixInsight license is $250. Is that right, guys?
No, it's $300. It's
$300.
Yeah, it's more like 300.
So Photoshop is $1074 a month to get that. And that's a recurring fee every month, which I hate. but
The
that's
other
way
the
it
other
is.
thing that you should know is that PixInsight has a free 45-day license. So that if you're interested in PixInsight, do what I did, which was I watched as much as I could videos and came up with a process. And then I had data, and then I said, okay, I'm going to get the free license for PixInsight, and if I don't like it, then I'll move to Photoshop. And I spent 5 days after I understood I had a process and a workflow to go through. I said, I'm going to stay with PixInsight at this point.
Yeah. The other thing too is I want to make sure I always say this on these calls is, in this club we have members that are really good at this stuff. And so for PixInsight, you have Mark, you have Doug, you have Conrad and other people that are really good at PixInsight. There's other people like Rodrigo, who's a club member, who's really good at Photoshop. I know Chris uses GIMP, which is a free software. So if you're interested in this stuff, there's always people in the club that can help you.
Yeah, there is one other piece of software that I use. I've tried them all. I use Star Tools periodically. I'm kind of mixed with that. It's very cheap. It's like $35. It's a guy from Australia. And then there's another program called APP. I tried that, but I always go back to PixInsight. It's more expensive, but those are also some tools, other tools if you want to save some money, a little cheaper, but.
And it also depends on the type of imaging you're doing. For example, I've gotten into using raw therapy for solar processing, for example, which is seems to work fairly well. So there's no one answer to your question, Linda. Hopefully we've given you enough to think about. If you want to chime in and follow up on your question, feel free.
No, those are all good responses. Does PixInsight do the stacking as well, right within the program?
Yes, but if you wanted a free software that would do just stacking, Deep Sky Stacker is a good place to start. It's free.
Yeah, I do Deep Sky Stacker, and then I move my workflow over to Photoshop currently and do everything within Photoshop. And I haven't had any issues as far as, quality of the processing or anything like that. Obviously, it starts with a good set of, a good starting image. But people have mentioned PixInsight, but also mentioned that it's daunting to try to learn it. I don't know if it's more expensive simply because I don't know if the $300 is a one-time shot.
It's one time.
Oh, okay. And then does it cost to upgrade or do
Nope.
anything annually?
Nope, those are free.
Yeah, because I've been spending whatever, $11 a month for a couple of years now. And, I'm starting to wonder if maybe I should just take the jump and learn PixInsight and move on. Because I have to put add-ons into Photoshop and then learn the add-ons. But, there are tutorials and teachers on it. So it does make it a little bit more simplistic. I would say if PixInsight has the equivalent number of good teachers out there, then that's something to, make a decision on as well. So, thanks. Good answers.
Yeah, I wish Rodrigo Roche was on this call. He is fantastic at deep sky processing in Photoshop. He's unbelievable. But and you guys can back me up or say I'm wrong. Most people that get into serious processing these days are using PixInsight. Is that a fair answer?
That's what I've heard. And that's why I was wondering what the difference was.
Is that a fair answer, guys?
Yeah, the other thing I do too is that I use PixInsight for 90% of the time, but I have Photoshop, and there are some really cool things that Photoshop can do. after I'm done with PixInsight. So
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
I'm not
that's
in
the way I
love
do
with
it too.
Photoshop. I just simply, that's just what I knew to begin with. And, you know, I wasn't, when I started a couple of years ago, I wasn't aware of PixInsight. I was just starting, and the teacher or tutorial that I was following used Photoshop. So I just followed their steps. And that's the only reason I used, and I did use a star tracker and a DSLR to start. And that's what ended up, you know, processing through to Photoshop. But PixInsight is intriguing right now, so that's why I'm asking.
Well, you're right. It is painful. I don't think there's any way around it. Doug, do you want to chime in on that part of it?
You know what, in
I-
astrophotography isn't painful. The
But
whole,
one thing about this
all-
club, I'll say, Linda, is if you get into PixInsight, we run periodic workshops. Doug's been doing this for a couple of years, and I know these guys do a workshop at Eagle Lake Observatory in August, Mark and Doug. So they can help you if you're learning.
Okay.
But it is I'm not going to lie to you, it's a daunting software. Chris, I think it's Chris Setness. Chris Setness mentioned Cyril as another tool that people use. I don't know, Chris, you want to chime in about that? Is Chris still on? Maybe he jumped off.
how are you spelling Cyril?
Siril, Cyril.
Oh,
Chris
Cyril.
doesn't have a mic. Linda, I also would recommend just if you go to Masters of PixInsight and you're interested in PixInsight, for $35 you can get a lesson.
That's good.
In some of their beginning, their very beginning, how do you stack and how do you do noise reduction and things like that. And if you find that that's appealing to you, they have a whole set of coursework. And what's nice about that is, if you, of course, every time you want a lesson, you have to pay. But I have personally taken one-on-one lessons with those guys, the masters.
And they're
for $35.
they're primarily
$35,
deep
they're very
space?
cheap.
Yeah,
Yes,
they're
all
deep
deep
space.
space, only
So,
deep space.
yeah, so not planetary imaging. or
No
anything.
planetary.
you can find a lot of planetary on YouTube. That's how I learned it.
Linda,
Yeah, I'm still working with that with AutoStacker and Registrax, but I'm
Yeah.
a ways away.
Linda also mentioned there's a new book by Rogelio, it's RBA, Rogelio Bernal Andreo. I think it's Mastering PixInsight. It's a really
That's
good read. It's really helpful.
It's very good. Very good book.
So
What's his last name?
It's great. Rogelio,
You can spell it.
Rogelio Bernal Andreo. That's
that's
what I
an easy
remember.
Okay.
Just so you know, that's out of print now. You can get it online as a PDF file.
Oh,
But
he's not printing them anymore?
yeah, I think he's hoping to have a new edition out with some more updates, but I think he's had some personal issues as well. So it may be on the back burner. It is available as a PDF though, and that's perfectly useful as well.
Okay.
It consists of 2 books. I think it consists of 2 books or
It does.
references.
There's a companion guide that's like
Yeah.
the short notes.
Yeah.
I'm going to go on to the next question. Shrey Parikh asks the perfect question for this group. Do you need low bortle or moonless nights for deep sky photography? Who wants
No.
to take that one?
Well, I use light pollution filters. They work for me.
No.
The answer is no. Go ahead, Doug.
Well, the best example is Russ Durkee, who was doing science in South Minneapolis.
Yep. So basically, if you want to capture deep sky images, you want to use narrowband filters. Hydrogen alpha filters, for example, will cut right through the moonlight and a lot of the city lights. I don't think they work well with LED lighting, but regular mercury vapor or sodium lighting, it cuts right through that. So a lot of people shoot narrowband if they live in the city. And it also works in moonlight too.
And I think the picture that Volz has and Volz can correct me if I'm wrong. I think he took that from his house in northern metro area. So lots of lights there. So, but that's narrowband, and that helps a lot then.
Yeah, even with the one shot, I don't do mono. I do one shot color. I have the L Intense and L Extreme, and now I got the one for the Hyperstar. I haven't tested it yet, but it's amazing what you can do. And what
That's dual band, right? That's what that is, dual band filter.
Yeah,
So either
Exactly.
the short answer, Shrey, is either dual band or narrow band will help you from the city or when the moon's out, etc. Neil, you asked, is there an imaging rig at JJ Casby? There is. Somebody want to answer that? At Eagle Lake Observatory, JJ. Oh, I'm sorry, JJ Casby Observatory on the east side. No, there's no imaging rig there, but people do use that 10-inch refractor to do imaging. It just doesn't have guiding or things like that. I don't know, Mark Connolly, have you done anything over there with deep sky imaging at Casby? Has anybody? The mount is pretty good. You can certainly do short exposure imaging at JJ Casby, but I wouldn't recommend long exposure. Anybody want to go on that? Okay.
I've only used it for planets. I mean, that's all I remember.
Yeah, I've used it for planets many times, but I haven't done deep sky there. The mount tracks pretty well. I just don't think it tracks well enough to not have guiding. Mary Lynn and Wally asked another question. Will a 1986 vintage, I think it's Super Polaris, it's SP, Super Polaris mount track accurately enough for photography? It has motors on both axes.
That comes down to a question of
Yeah,
exposure. So if you're going to
exactly.
do a 5-minute exposure, then you need a good mount so that you don't get star trails. If you do a 10-minute exposure, then you need a better mount. So a lot of it depends upon what your field of view is and how long your exposure is going to be.
And also
If-
how well you polar aligned.
And yes, how well you set up your mount. We'll just use those terms rather than.
Yeah. The short answer, Mary Lynn, or well, I'm not sure which one's asking the question, is that you won't be able to guide probably with your mount. I don't think it has the necessary hardware components to allow you to guide, which helps fix tracking errors. But you should be able to do some shorter exposure, like Doug said, and planets and solar and things like that. So yes, you can.
Yeah, just when I started, I was not guiding, and I was taking 60-second pictures through my my Newtonian, and but if I went any longer, then I would start to see oblong stars.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of exposure. So yes, you can. It's just you guys have to see what your picture looks like, and make adjustments from there. If you can run 5 minutes, then that's great. We can actually, on the imaging rig down at CGO, we can run 5 minutes, and it's well enough set up, polar aligned, that we don't need any guiding at all. Guiding will follow the stars, help you follow the stars.
So the things you'll have to deal with your mount, Mary Lynn, is you have to really get the polar aligning right. You have to balance your scope properly, and you have to level your mount perfectly. That'll really
And
help.
don't overload it.
Yes, and don't put too much weight on. Yes, exactly. I think the Super Polaris was what, 40 pounds was the limit? I think. Anybody have a Super Polaris mount?
Suresh, this is Wally.
Yeah.
I believe it's about 20. Our C8 that came on it is around 14 pounds.
That's a bit heavy for imaging. The general rule of thumb is don't exceed 60 to 75% of the stated load capacity. So if you're 20 pounds, you really shouldn't go above, say, 12 to 14 pounds with everything, the scope, the camera, any other, guide scope, any other equipment you may have. You don't want to go past it. So if you want to, I wouldn't use a C8 on a Super Polaris if it's only a 20-pound load.
Okay, Mary Lynn has a short tube 80, and we also have a Takahashi 100 millimeter that are a little bit lighter. So we're interested in getting started in this, particularly Mary Lynn. She's really into photography, and try to play around with stuff we already have rather than go out and spend a lot on equipment and just not know where we're headed.
I would definitely start with the smaller scope. The tolerances are not as tight as it would be with a C8, for example. So your tracking errors and the like can be a little bit bigger, and it won't destroy the photo.
So to Suresh's point, there's a lot of things that you got to learn how to do And starting with a shorter scope, a shorter focal length will work well for you. And then once you cover those particular problems and solve those particular problems you run into, then you can start to add focal length and see how far you can push it.
Yeah, but ultimately you will want to be using, will want to guide. Guiding solves a lot of ills in the image data gathering. So ultimately you'll want to figure out a solution for that.
The guiding is not necessarily you have to do it, but
It helps.
you know, for instance, you know, the mount we have down at CGO is it's a Paramount mount, an ME, is it an ME2? I can't remember. Excuse me. And
Yes, and maybe
we
too.
don't guide on that. We get 5-minute pictures with,
Yeah, but that's a $14,000
stars.
mount, Doug.
yes, I understand that.
I don't
You're
guide
saying
with my
guiding.
mighty.
Guiding
They're
is
talking
necessary.
about a 1986 Super Polaris. You're
Yes.
talking about a Paramount.
Well, you were talking about when they go to an X mount or
Yes, yeah, well,
something like that.
okay. Just going to the next question here, Mike. I think we answered your question. Is the license for PixInsight only good for the current version? I think Balt's answered it, right? No renewal, upgrades are included, so you're good there. Let's see, Mike Shaw said, great presentation, Doug. Chris said, Serial is what I use for stacking. It's free and it's open source. So Linda, that's Serial, that's what he uses for stacking.
Yeah, PixInsight's got a wonderful weighted batch pre-processing. I mean, it does everything for you. I mean, if you want to spend the money, it's really a good process within PixInsight. I was leery of it at first, but.
And Balt points out something that I probably should have mentioned earlier, with the difference between PixInsight and Photoshop is PixInsight does not use layers, whereas Photoshop uses layers. And I've struggled personally with understanding how to use layers. And from that perspective, for me, PixInsight's been easier. But in theory, Photoshop should be easier for most people. I hope that helps, Linda, with your question. Let's see.
Yeah, it does help because layers aren't super easy to understand all the time. So yeah,
Mike?
especially with astrophotography. But in any event, I kind of have it down now, but it took me a while. But yeah, I am intrigued about PixInsight, and I probably will look into it and
We
reach
can
out.
help you out.
Every time we pay that $11, Linda, there goes another
Exactly.
$11.
Especially if it's in the middle of winter and I'm not using
I know,
it.
exactly.
Yeah,
Mike?
and don't short yourself on a CPU because a really fast desktop, like I finally got one, it makes a huge difference. If you're going to get into serious, processing, you got to get a system that's going to, otherwise you're going to wait for a long time.
Yeah.
Invest
On
in a
what,
good PC.
PixInsight? On PixInsight?
He's talking about when the processes run, it can take a while.
On PixInsight though?
Yeah, PixInsight.
Because I don't have any issues with that on Photoshop with my laptops that I'm using.
Because I think in Photoshop, at least the way I use it with these, I use a Starzona tool pack for Photoshop. I use it for post-processing. It actually works pretty well.
Starzona?
Yes, it's called a Starzona tool pack for Photoshop. It's $20.
Oh, that sounds.
It makes things a lot easier. And if you hit me up offline, and I'll give you more information about it. But where was I going with that? Photoshop, those processes are not as comprehensive as the ones in PixInsight. They're more focused, each one of those steps. So that's why I think they run faster. PixInsight's is a lot deeper. So these processes can take, like, weighted batch pre-processing will take, what, Conrad, a half hour?
Well, with my new desktop, it takes 15, 20 minutes. It used to take over an hour.
Yeah, so somewhere between 20 minutes and an hour, depending on your computer. When I run my processes, it usually takes me about 2.5 hours to get through PixInsight with all the various steps that I do. Not just one thing, but through everything, through the processing. Yeah. It can take me several hours. Let's see, Mike Glazer sent four let me just read them. I'm just learning all this. Processing included Deep Sky, Stack, Serial, and Sequitur. I've used each of those for free image stacking. Does one-shot color imaging work as well as narrowband and light polluted skies in the city? I think you just answered my question, dual band filter. Anybody want to follow up with that?
Yes, I have an Optolink L Extreme filter that is dual band. So yeah, you can get filters that will kind of just give you some narrow bands to let the light through and cut out the light pollution.
Bill, did you want to add anything about dual bands? I know you've done a lot of dual band work.
I don't know that I have anything more to add. That's pretty accurate.
Okay. Let's see. Kurt Casby, I think is a comment. There was a guide camera on the scope out at JJ Casby originally. Maybe it's not there anymore. I don't know. Is there a guide camera at JJ Casby? I don't remember seeing one recently. Besides, you'd have to plug it into the mount to get it to guide. And that's where I think the actual issue is getting the right cables and getting it to work and all that. Conrad, you added that you use a ZW ASI 183 MC Pro one-shot color with your light pollution filters. Did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, it just works really well. I live in a Bortle 6, so, you know, moon or no moon, you know, or even my neighbor with their Christmas lights on year round, it blocks all of it.
Okay.
I guess I
Mike,
could add that I have shot full moon with narrowband or dual band filters, and yeah, it is pretty amazing.
it's a good, cheaper way of getting into deep sky imaging in light polluted areas.
Yeah,
And
if
with
you
the
don't have a
moon.
monochrome camera, it's pretty useful around here to
Right.
have a dual band filter.
Yeah,
I'd
and for-
add it to the list.
Yeah, and for me, I use Hyperstar, so, you know, I get, you know, we've talked about guiding. I could get by without guiding at all on my Hyperstar, 60 minutes, I mean, 60 seconds. So you can get by without guiding if you have a very fast scope.
Yeah, but you're at f1.9 though.
Right.
Which helps.
Yes.
Mike Shaw mentions, hey, Mike, good to hear from you. You mentioned a book on astrophotography written by Alan Dyer and Terrence Dickinson. I'm just reading your link here. It's called The Backyard Astronomer's Guide. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a really, really good comprehensive book for beginning astronomy and astrophotography. So it really breaks it down with lots of good pictures.
Excellent. Good to hear from you, Mike.
Likewise, man. Great presentation, Doug.
Well, thank you.
And Doug always does a good job. Kurt, paraphrase Jerry, get out there and image. The best advice I got as a beginner was just do it. It's a learning process, my 2 cents. All right, everybody. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Doug.
All right, bye.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, Suresh. Thanks, everybody.